In this lesson, I'm going to explain how to use masks to create vignettes. Vignettes help you highlight certain areas of a video clip or a still image or a graphic. So to follow along, go to Working Files and open up After Effects Projects and then start up 1003 Vignettes. This project has 3 comps, this girl with the bubbles, this guy working on the microscope, and the bride and her bridesmaid. We're going to add vignettes to all 3 of these things. Each has certain characteristics that will show us different ways to do vignettes. We're going to start off with the absolute standard de facto vignette, which is an oval, an ellipse, where you darken the corners of an image, or a video clip in this case. And the easiest way to do that is to add a black solid layer above this, and then put an ellipse on there, and then have the edges be black and the inside be open so you can see what's below it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add a black solid layer first, just by right-clicking down here in the timeline, going New, Solid, have it be black. Just drag your cursor down to the corner there and click OK, and click OK. And there you get this black thing. Not good, right? But we're going to put an ellipse on there really quickly now. Go over to the shape tools there, click on the ellipse tool, make sure that the black solid layer is selected, otherwise you're going to create a new shape layer, and simply double click on this guy, and that adds an ellipse to that solid black layer. And obviously that's not exactly what we want to have happen. We want to have this be the visible part and this be the opaque part. So you can do that in one of 2 ways. You can click on inverted, and that's the most likely way you'll do it. Or you can do the method that I said we weren't really going to talk about too much in this course, and that is to click on subtract, which is essentially the same thing as invert. So we're going to go back and do the standard way, just clicking on inverted there. And now we're done, sort of, right? You could call it a day if you like, but that's kind of an abrupt edge, and that's probably not what you really want to do. So the next step when you make a vignette is to feather the edge. So inside the mask, you can do that. I'm going to press M twice to bring up the various mask properties, and there's mask feather. So let's raise this up a bit so we can kind of soften things up. That works okay. And it's still kind of abrupt though. It's awfully dark there. We don't want it to be black. We want it just to be dark. So now you can drop the opacity. When you drop the opacity, essentially you're letting more of the layer below it show through. So I'm going to drop the opacity, and now I can let more come in. And you can adjust this to taste, as they say. But it's a good idea when you do this to go before and after. So turn off that top layer. That's before. That's after. And you got to ask yourself, is this something where your viewers are going to go, oh, they added a vignette? You probably don't want that. You probably want them to just say, oh, that's a nice video clip. That looks good. This girl blowing bubbles there. That's very nice. And you don't want them to think about the fact that you put a vignette on it. So that level right there, I've got a 48% opacity, seems to work pretty well. All right, let's move on to the microscope guy. And I want to add a mask here, a vignette here, but I want to vignette him here. I don't want to have the ellipse fill the entire screen. And so it's better if I just apply the ellipse right there and make sure I get it centered up on him rather than do it automatically by double clicking here. So if I just take the ellipse tool and start dragging over him, you know what's going to happen, right? Boom, he disappears, and then I need to kind of adjust things, and it's kind of awkward to work here in the comp layer. So I'll go Control or Command Z to undo that. Instead, let's work in the layer panel. So I'm going to double click on this guy to open it up in the layer panel. There you go. And I'm going to create the vignette here so that when I create it, he won't disappear. To do that, I need to make sure that this is unchecked. So I'll leave it unchecked like that. We've got our ellipse tool here, and I'm going to center it up right about there and start dragging. And you know when you center it up, you're actually just putting the upper left-hand corner as you drag down. But if I hold down the Control key now, it's going to actually center up where I started. Not critical, I can always move it later, but there you go. Got that pretty well centered up, and I think that works for me. I like the fact that it's a little bit taller than it is like that. I'd rather have it be tall than have it be fat like that. So make it a little bit taller than we need and let it go at that. I'm going to move through the clip here and see how much he moves. It does move a little bit to the left there. So maybe I want the vignette just to go a little bit farther to the left. So if I double click on it with the selection tool by pressing V for the selection tool and double click on it, that puts a bounding box around it. I can kind of stretch it out like that, just a little bit like that. If I want to keyframe this and have it move with the clip, I could do that too. I'm going to talk about animating masks in the next lesson, so we'll just let this be a static mask like that. And that works okay. I like that. So let's go back now to the composition. You'll see that we've our mask there. It's nice. We don't want to have it on the layer itself. We want to have it on a black layer above it. So I'm going to add a black solid above it by right-clicking down here. The New, Solid like that. Click a black one there. I'm going to take this mask here, Control or Command C to copy it. I'm going to turn it off like that by going None. go to the top layer here, and go Control or Command V to paste it. And now I'm going to invert it, so I need to open this guy up by pressing the M key to open up the mask, and we'll invert it like so, and lo and behold, we've got our mask. And obviously now we want to do the same thing we did with the previous one. We need to open up the mask properties by pressing M a couple times there. I'm going to feather it up a bit, like so, soften it up, maybe expand it slightly, because we kind of moved in a bit on it. And now we're going to drop the opacity quite a bit, because again, we don't want it to be obvious that we've had a vignette, but maybe right about there. I'm going to turn off the display of the mask border by clicking on this little toggle mask shape visibility there. And now let's do the before and after business again. That's the after, this is the before. It looks a little obvious. I'm going to knock it down just a little bit more there. There you go. Try to be subtle about it. But I think that works well, and it's going to follow him pretty much. You know, it's going to look like it's kind of following him and kind of keep him in the spotlight without it obviously being a spotlight. There we go. That works pretty well. All right, moving on to bride. This poses a little bit of an issue for us because this is a still image where the frame is quite a bit larger than the resolution of this HD frame. For example, let's just take a look there. Bride and Bridesmaids is 3600 by 2500, and this is 1920 by 1080, so it's almost twice as big. You can just pull out a little bit and see that. Let's go down to 12.5%. You can see the frame is much bigger than the actual HD frame there. We'll go back to Fit, pressing Shift / there we go. So when we make a mask in the layer panel, and then we want to apply that mask to a solid layer later, the mask is going to be quite a bit larger than we expect it to be because the mask will be made on something large and put on something relatively small, but we'll adjust that after the fact. So the first order of business is to make our mask, and you know it's easier to make the mask in the layer panel when we really want to make it specific to a certain region. So I'm going to open these guys up in the layer panel by double-clicking them. Now we're in the layer panel. I'm going to go get the ellipse. I'm going to click right about there for my center, start dragging the ellipse, hold down the Control key to really center it up nicely there. Although we can change this later, but I'm using the space bar to move around a bit. There we go. And I'm making it so it doesn't fill the entire frame because if you go back to the comp, you know that comp is just part of the entire image, whereas the layer is the whole image. That actually seems to work pretty well. I'm going to use my selection tool by pressing V here and double-clicking on this and maybe pulling it down just a tad there. And we can adjust this later inside the comp panel. But there you go. We've got our mask now. Go back to the composition side of things and click away to deselect all of that. There we go. So that's a pretty good mask. And now we want to apply that to the solid layer. We don't want the solid layer this time to be black. We want it to be white. We're dealing with a bride here, right? So let's make a white solid layer here by right-clicking. New solid. Have it be white. There, get up to there. Click OK. We're going to add this white solid there. Let's go copy and paste the mask. So I'm going to take this mask, Control or Command C to copy it. I'm going to turn it off by going to None here. It'll still show up because this layer is selected. I'll select this layer instead. And I'll do Control or Command V. Now that mask is applied to the white solid, and it's not where we want, and it's way too big, right? You can see that. So the easiest way to fix this is just to double click on it right there to put the bounding box around it, and you can start shrinking it down from over here and hold on the Shift key to kind of constrain it and pull it in place like that, and it'll be best to be able to see what's going on. So I'm going to invert it by opening it up over here and press the M key to open up masks and invert it. There we go. Now we got things lined up. Double click again on it to get the bounding box, and maybe we want to expand it a little bit perhaps. That's the taste, obviously. Whatever you think works for you, pull it out just a maybe like that, something like that. Nevertheless, there's our mask on our white solid, and we'll just click away here to get rid of the bounding box. So we're going to do the standard things we've done before now. We're going to work on the feathering and the opacity, so I'm going to just press M here twice to get all the mask properties open. We'll feather it up quite a bit there. There you go. And we'll drop the opacity quite a bit, so it's not quite so obvious what's going on here. And there you have it. Now that could be enough, right? But I want to add one more thing here just to kind of round this out. I'm going to add some blurring to the background here as well to really focus our attention on the bride and the bridesmaid here. So to do that, I'm going to add what's called an adjustment layer. We've worked with adjustment layers a couple times before, but basically an adjustment layer is a transparent layer on which you can apply effects. And those effects then will show up on anything below that adjustment layer that's visible. And what's below the adjustment layer here, after we apply a mask to it, will be this stuff out here, the white area and the solid, and the area outside the bridesmaid and the bride down in the bottom layer. So we're going to add an adjustment layer by right-clicking, going to New Adjustment Layer. There you go. Nothing will happen. It's transparent. Now I want to add the mask to it, and I want to add the correct mask to it. I don't want the mask from down here because it's too big. But I'll get the mask from the white solid here, pressing the M key to open up Mask, clicking on Mask, going Control or Command C to copy that mask, then going through the adjustment layer, apply the mask there by going Control or Command V. And now we've applied it there to the adjustment layer. So that now means that the area that will be affected by any property we put inside the adjustment layer will be here outside the mask, which is letting this area be transparent, and this area is not transparent. So we're going to apply a blur to it. We'll go get Fast Blur. So go to Effects and Presets over here, type in Fast, Blur, and eventually you're going to see Fast Blur there. We haven't talked much about effects, so I just want to let you know that when you've got an effect there, to apply it to a layer, just drag it to the layer. That's one way to apply it. Drag it down here to the adjustment layer. Now we've added blur to the adjustment layer. Now the blur will affect everything outside the mask, remember, because we inverted the mask. So here's the blur there in the Effect Controls panel. If you don't see the Effect Controls panel, you might be seeing the Project panel. Just click on the Effect Controls panel tab there. And if you don't see it at all, you need to go to Window, and down here at the bottom will be the Effect Controls panel. You click on that to open it up. We want to repeat the edge pixels because that avoids having kind of a little hard rounded edge there. So click on Repeat Edge Pixels. Now we're going to make it blurry. And I'll watch the flowers in the background, how they kind of blur out there. But the girl and the woman do not blur out. That's because the layer on the top here and the layer below it are transparent, showing the bottom layer straight through. So there you go. There are several different ways to use masks to create a variety of vignettes.